Hello, Laverne here, and thank you for joining me. May this video be a blessing to you, and may it honor and glorify God in His kingdom. In this video, I'm going to be addressing the arguments put forward by Brett Palmer in his latest two videos that the Hebrews, the ancient Hebrews, believed, according to Scripture, that the earth is flat. This is his argument that he is putting forward. According to him, the Bible got these things wrong. Well, does Scripture actually confirm this? Does Scripture tell us that the ancient Hebrews believed the earth was flat? I'm going to include links to his two latest videos, but I'm not going to look at the arguments in any particular order. I'm just going to discuss them as they come to my mind. One of the arguments he put forward is that the Hebrews, when looking out upon the world, observed that it looked flat. That when they would look from a plain kind of place, the desert, they would see that the world looked flat, and therefore they came to the conclusion that the world is flat. Well, there's nothing to back this up, no evidence whatsoever. This is complete conjecture and guesswork on his part. I understand that this is an argument, but it is simple conjecture and guesswork. It is a theory with no supporting evidence whatsoever. Another argument he puts forward is that the Egyptians believed that the earth was flat. And because the Egyptians believed it, and the Hebrews lived in close proximity to them, and because the Hebrews did not state otherwise, did not refute, if you will, the belief of the Egyptians, we must, based on this omission, come to the conclusion that the Hebrews also believed the earth was flat. Well, this is utter nonsense. How you come to this conclusion is beyond me. To state that if one nation believes one thing and another nation believes something else, if they do not refute the beliefs of their neighbor in writing, and we do not see it, then we must conclude that they believe the same thing. I just don't understand the thinking of this. It makes no sense to me whatsoever how you can come to these conclusions. It's not scientific. There's no evidence whatsoever to back this up. And to make these kind of offhand statements without evidence, it just shows ignorance. I'm sorry, but it shows ignorance on the part of the one putting forth the argument. Now, looking at the arguments that he does use from Scripture, he quotes a couple passages, but unfortunately he takes them out of context. He doesn't understand the meaning or how it is that the writer is explaining things. Now, the one passage is from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. It's funny how the same people who say that Scripture is telling us the earth was in fact round also use this passage. But according to Brett, this passage is showing us that the earth is flat. Well, it reads, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretches out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." So I'm actually going to read this backwards now, from the last part. "And spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." I ask you, does this mean we're supposed to take this literally, that it is describing the heavens as a tent, that the heavens are a tent? Or is this a picturesque way of describing it? Going back, it describes the inhabitants as grasshoppers. Well, are we to believe that we are actually grasshoppers? Or is this a picturesque way of describing the inhabitants of the earth when compared to God? And then going back to the beginning, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." Now, are we all of a sudden to believe that this is talking about the actual earth and as the Hebrews thought of it? That the first line is of what they actually believed, a scientific observation, if you will, of the earth. And then everything to follow after that is simply a picturesque way to describe things. This is all in one verse. It doesn't make sense that you would apply two different standards of thinking to this passage. Yet that's exactly what Brett has done. Now, I'd like to talk about the observation of this circle and Brett's understanding of it. According to Brett, the circle that it's describing is such as this: a disc-like circle, flat. He is assuming this is what is being described and that God is sitting above it, rather than it being described as this way, a circle with God sitting above it this way. Now consider what the sun and the moon look like when we observe it. They look like a circle such as this. The sun and the moon do not look like this. And so when it's talking about the circle of the earth, it certainly, in my mind, would make more sense that it's describing it because of the way that the sun and the moon appear from the earth. Now, Brett tries to address this by talking about an apologist who explains this passage that it's describing the same kind of way that someone would observe the earth if they were in a spaceship. According to the apologist, in a spaceship we would observe the earth as a circle. According to Brett, that's not the case, that someone from the spaceship would observe the earth as a marble, in very much the same way that a child in a classroom looking at a globe would see the globe in its three dimensions. But the thing is, it all depends on how far you are from the earth. If you're not that far from the earth and you look back, yes, it's going to appear as a marble. But the further you get away, the less distinct the image is. The further you get away, the more it appears like a circle or a disc. If you were to observe the earth from the moon, would it really appear like a marble, or would it appear like a circle? The further you get away, that's why when we look at the moon and the sun from the earth, they appear as a circle. So I ask you, how is it you can jump to the conclusion then from this passage that the circle being described is this way rather than this way? So that, I guess, would be one of my questions to Brett, although I have asked him a number of questions in the comments section of his videos, and my response is that, according to him, I'm a troll. So if you disagree with something Brett has to say, you are a troll. Simple as that. Now the other passage that, actually before I get on to the next passage, I want to read something else from Isaiah chapter 40. This is the same writer, same chapter, and I'm reading from verse 6. The voice said, "Cry," and he said, "What shall I cry? All flesh is grass." So I'm going to stop here. All flesh is grass. Am I to assume then that Isaiah is saying that our flesh is actually grass? That would be kind of ridiculous. Of course, we do not come to this assumption that Isaiah is describing my flesh or your flesh or anyone's flesh as actually being grass. This is a picturesque way of describing it. The same kind of thing is done in verse 40 that I just read from. We cannot assume that this is some kind of actual true depiction of what the Hebrews believed the earth looked like. It boggles my mind the conclusions that people like brettppalmer are coming to. Now I'm going to read from the other passage that Brett uses. Job chapter 26 verse 10. It reads, "He hath compassed the waters." Now Brett would have you stop there and say, well, this is talking about encompassing or encircling the waters, and this therefore is supporting his idea that the earth was considered to be flat and a circle. But the passage, when you read it in context, that's not what it's saying. It reads, "He hath compassed the waters with bounds until the day and night come to an end." He's describing the boundaries that are placed on the waters. This encompassing, this circling of, and the boundaries that it's describing here. It's describing God enforcing his laws and his boundaries on the waters. It is in no way describing a flat earth. and it in no way supports what Brett is saying. So these are the only passages he's really been referring to so far, talking about the circle and so on. There's no way we can come to the conclusion that it's talking about a disk like Earth. Now, one of his other arguments, the final one I'm going to talk about in this video, is that he makes the claim that if they lacked the word to describe a sphere, if their language was lacking somehow to describe something, that their language would have evolved and they would have invented the words to describe it. So if they wanted to describe the Earth as a sphere, they would have done it. But the thing is, that same argument works for the other side as well. If they wanted to describe a flat Earth, they had the words to do it. They had the phrases. We see the words flat and earth and edge in Scripture. We see the words edge of the wilderness and edge of the sea, describing boundaries. So if it uses the word edge to describe boundaries in these cases, why would it not? If they believed the earth was round and limited in size, why would they not use these same phrases to describe the earth? The edge of the world, for example. Or why would they not use the phrase flat earth to describe the earth? They had these words and phrases, and yet they chose not to use them. So I would ask Brett, why did they not use these words and phrases when they had them? And they had the ability to describe the earth as being flat, without question, without doubt. They could have been very clear about it. And yet they didn't. They chose not to. There has to be a reason that they didn't describe the earth in this fashion. All right, as always, I look forward to comments and messages. Till next time, peace and blessings.